Well, I guess we have come full circle because the DoDCast really came to be this night 53 weeks ago, the first night of the winter meetings. And now he's Drew Douglas. I'm Ron Chuckett. And it's time for the DoDCast. And we'll be with you nightly the next 4 nights at 9 o'clock to go through all the Nationals news from the winter meetings, except for the press conferences where nothing was really said except that Dave Martinez and Harold Reynolds are probably still wanted in Las Vegas. But as you know, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. At least that's what Mark Davis hopes for the Raiders. How you doing, Drew?
I'm doing well. Excited for some rumors and maybe even a transaction or two.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is what it's all about. The 4 nights a year where in busy where you just never know what's going to happen. This was our first winter meetings broadcast last year. The Chris Sale no trade broke as a trade. They were going out to have Chinese dinner to celebrate, and over the fortune cookies and Mugu Gai Pian, it all fell apart. I remember waking up at 5:30 the next morning excited, figuring we'd have to write about a trade, and there was no trade. Speaking of which, Seth, a dear friend of the show, keeps asking me, is this the time we're going to have a trade during the show? And every time I say no, but the next 4 nights, you just never know. All right, so let's see. There is no real news to start the show. So let's go through and talk about the things that happened over the weekend. Let's start with the Ohtani signing with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Don't know any of the specifics of that deal outside of the fact that he will pitch and will DH, and that the Angels will experiment with a 6-man rotation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see him go to the Angels. I was expecting him to go to Seattle, which I think most people were expecting, especially after they were making a few trades late in the Ohtani sweepstakes to acquire some more international money. But I think it'll be interesting to see him with the Angels, especially with the whole Pujols, especially with how the whole Pujols situation plays out, because with his health, he's not really capable of playing too much first base anymore. So he's been DHing, but they said Ohtani is going to be a 2-way player, which means he's going to DH. So I'll be interested to see how that works out throughout this season.
So if you are Mike Scioscia, not one to be, movable by such things as analytics or computers or even abacuses, what do you do in the games that he pitches? Do you DH someone else, or you just leave him into DH and have someone come in to pitch? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I think you'd have to DH someone else, because if he's in the lineup, then you don't have the DH, and so if he gets pulled, then I would assume then the reliever would have to hit, which means you're using pinch hitters and everything. So I would assume he's just going to DH on days he doesn't pitch.
Here's a fun fact. You can use a designated hitter for anyone you want. It does not have to be for the pitcher. Think about that. So on days that he pitches and would hit, they could technically DH for the catcher.
Yeah, maybe they could experiment with that a little bit.
That'll be wild to watch to see. And, of course, the other big thing over the weekend is Giancarlo Stanton is now a member of the New York Yankees, and in no uncertain terms has let people know what he thought of the Miami Marlins organization. Now, considering that the Yankees traded for Stanton for a bucket of warm spit, a couple prospects that were never going to make the major leagues, and some of MacGyver's bubblegum, what's your thoughts on all that?
I think that Yankees lineup is going to be very difficult to pitch and navigate through, just with Stanton and then Judge, assuming he doesn't go through somewhat of a sophomore slump this year. Then you throw in Gary Sanchez and just all their young talent. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch for years to come.
Yeah, I don't want to admit that too loudly. I'm sure I'm waiting for the chat to kind of let me know that, but it's true. And I'll be curious to see what Judge does in his second year. There should be some come down to that. I love the pictures going around of the Green Monster at Fenway going up to 70 feet tall to keep them in there. Tanaka has opted out too, so you don't know what the Yankees are going to do. I mean, yes, on paper they're a better team. but Stanton has some durability issues. Some of that, of course, being from the fact he keeps getting plunked in the face. But I'm more interested in his open contempt towards Miami. I've never seen anyone really kind of burn bridges like what Stanton did, especially today in his press conference, circus and all that. So, but yeah, I mean, the two ones when Ricky and I got together on Thursday, those were the two big stories going in, and they're now settled, which now leads us to whatever Washington might do. And so far, in day one, it is nothing. But we weren't really expecting much of anything today, were we?
No, I think right now, as the roster currently stands, they don't really have too many holes. Obviously, they could use a fifth starting pitcher. They have a need for a catcher, possibly even a starting catcher if they want to relegate Wieters to a lesser role. And then maybe even an outfielder. Obviously, they have Michael Taylor in center field right now. We've heard them maybe connected to some other outfielders. And a late inning reliever with Brandon Kinsler currently being a free agent. But
well, sorry about that. Well, the one that's come up tonight is Marcell Ozuna from the fire-selling Miami Marlins. According to Ken Rosenthal, Marlins are telling teams Ozuna would be easier to acquire than outfield mate Christian Yelich because Yelich has a team-friendly contract through 2022, and Ozuna, I believe, only has 2 more years of team control. And for whatever reason, the Nats, I don't know whether the Marlins are trying to drum up interest. I don't see why the Nats would be all that interested in him. They have Taylor in center already. You know, they have Adam Eaton, who will be playing on left field. That did come out from Dave Martinez. And leading off, which I suppose we can talk about in a minute. You know, the Nats have tremendous outfield depth. I'm not quite sure why Ozuna, outside of is he available and yes, is part of the conversation. I mean, do you see something there?
Yeah, I would love for the Nationals to acquire Ozuna. And he seems to always kill the Nats, and he's in the divisions to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. But also, I think Ozuna's contract is something to take note of too, because he is under team control for 2 more years. And if a certain Nationals right fielder whose contract may or may not be somewhat of a talking point right now decides to go play elsewhere next year, then you have Victor Robles come up. And if Ozuna leaves after 2 years, then maybe Juan Soto's ready. So I think maybe even that contract could kind of be a bridge to some of these younger outfielders that the Nationals have in the organization.
So who would you give up for Ozuna?
If they want Taylor, I would definitely give him Taylor. I mean, Ozuna's a great player, and he is only under team control for 2 years, so I wouldn't touch obviously Robles or Soto or Keyboom, some of the top prospects, but I think some of those mid-tier prospects, I'd throw in a few of those in addition to Taylor.
All right. Other rumors that were flying around today, courtesy of MLB Trade Rumors. Hector Rondon, who was non-tendered by the Cubs, projected to make $6.2 million in arbitration, was the one that lost the job for the Cubs a couple years ago as a closer. The Nats are probably going to need some bullpen help. That, depending on when they sign him, that could be a big key, especially if they're going to lose Brandon Kinsler like we think they are.
Yeah, I don't think I would have Rondon as the primary target, but I think if some of these other options fall through or if they're too expensive, as I think Kinsler probably will be for the Nationals, I think Rondon is definitely a fine backup option, and he'd fit in nicely in the Nationals bullpen.
And there's another rumor that came up today, someone that the Braves non-tendered and who you wrote about, Matt Adams, as a possible first baseman backup for Ryan Zimmerman and to take the Adam Lind role. I mean, that would be actually a very good deal if they were able to get him, depending on what he wanted.
Yeah, I agree. He was in St. Louis for a long time, and he went to Atlanta in an early season trade last year, and he just absolutely raked in Atlanta. He did great pinch hitting, and then when Freddie Freeman was out for a long time, he did a great job filling in as the starting first baseman. So I think he could fit in nicely with the Nationals as a backup to Ryan Zimmerman and being the permanent starter if Zimmerman were to suffer an injury.
He did so well in Atlanta that when Freddie Freeman came back, Freeman moved to third. Yeah. So Adams could play first. I mean, that's great flexibility to have. The kind of surprise, I suppose, today was the floating of Gio Gonzalez as a possible trade chip. I'm not sure that will actually happen. We'll touch upon it later this week on the website. But I mean, isn't that the one, unlike the outfielders where they have depth to move around? I mean, what could you possibly get for Gio Gonzalez in a position that they aren't very strong in as far depth concern wise?
Yeah, I think if they do trade Gio, they'd maybe be trying to fill one of the other holes like catcher, outfielder, maybe even bullpen. But I think they'd go to either catcher or outfield before that. And they would obviously need to acquire then 2 starting pitchers. So I think it would have to have a couple other moves in the works as well. But a name that I heard today, the Brewers were supposedly floating, is Domingo Santana, who he's only 25. He hit 30 homers last year and hit close to 280. So I would love him in the outfield. And they're supposedly looking for a starting pitcher to eat innings and preferably a lefty. So I didn't hear Gio connected to them, but I don't know, it made sense to me at least.
Well, that would be the case, and it's certainly affordable for Milwaukee. One of the things that I noticed watching them down the stretch last year was that they really needed a veteran presence in that starting rotation. But because unless there's another pitcher coming to Washington, I just don't see Gio being all that expendable, even though his price is very good, $12 million for 1 year. And as you said, he's an innings eater. Now, little bits that we've read today from the press conferences, it's hard to take Mike Rizzo at his public word because he is the king of stealth deals. But at the moment, the Nats are thinking that their 5th starter is going to be either Eric Fetty or AJ Cole, someone that's going to come from in-house. I'm not buying that. Are you?
No, I'm not. I don't think either one of them are really ready. I think Fetty has a bright future ahead of him, but 2018 is going to be a huge year for the Nationals, and I don't really think Fetty's ready to go in and become a part of the rotation permanently.
Yeah, I could see it in 2019, but not in 2018. So outside of Pat Neshek signing for the Phillies, let's talk about that real quick because that really was the only movement actually at the winter meetings today. Gets 2 years, roughly $16.5 million. Closes the Phillies available payroll for a possible Bryce Harper thing for next year. Not too much, though. I mean, they have an obscene amount of money available, like $130 million available to play for free agency next year. Good for the Phillies. And I would think at this point they have passed whatever the Marlins are going to do and may be able to contend with the Braves for 3rd in the division. I guess the other big surprise is that the Mets are floating out Matt Harvey's name.
Yeah, I think Harvey just really needs to change the scenery. He was great a couple years ago, though the Dark Knight stuff in their World Series run. But, just lately, the whole Mets organization is just a complete mess right now. And then also, I think Harvey's arm probably isn't as good a shape as it used to be because he came back from Tommy John, and the Nationals, they held back Steven Strasburg back in 2012, and it was highly criticized. But the Mets did just the opposite, and he pitched. He wasn't shut down because they were going on a playoff run. He pitched all throughout that postseason in the World Series, and ever since then, he just hasn't been the same. So I think maybe he's still struggling because of that, just from not being properly handled after Tommy John surgery.
Right. And that's too bad. The few times that I saw him last year, he was absolutely god-awful. This wasn't Dark Knight. This was, if you were a vampire, this is noonday brunch on the veranda in the sun. Just the complete opposite of all that. All right. Well, I'd like to thank all you readers out there. This has been the most read day in site history, over 55,000 page views for anyone who keeps track of that stuff, because I did a slider on where Bryce Harper might end up. So you should go take a read on that if you haven't already. That's out there. And Drew, you did a couple pieces. You did one on whether or not Michael Taylor will be traded. Talk a little bit more about that. I hate speculating that anyone is going to get traded because you get to know, even if it's just by watching on television, these are people and not, rotisserie fantasy baseball players. But we both feel that if there is going to be a trade this offseason, that there's a decent chance he's going to be the headliner.
Yeah, he really broke through in 2017 and had a great postseason. And I think he's a great player right now, and he's obviously very young and has a lot of years of team control left. But I think he's by far the Nationals' top trade chip. They do have a surplus of outfielders with Bryce Harper and Adam Eaton already in the outfield. Not to mention Brian Goodwin is on the 40-man roster in addition to some prospects. And so I think because of the surplus, he is expendable, and he's by far their best trade chip. Maybe Wilmer Defoe is up there with him, but Taylor is much better. So I think, yeah, if the Nationals want to make a big trade this offseason, Taylor will probably be involved in it.
Based on what we've seen so far, and I know this is kind of like asking to pick an election winner with 2% of the vote in with the 51-49 spread, do you think the Nats are going to be active this week?
I think there will be some rumors, and Rizzo is always working on moves. I think he'll be working on some trades. We've already heard them linked to some names, like we've mentioned Ozuna. We heard Real Muto early in the offseason, maybe Garrett Cole. So I don't know that they get anything done, but I think we'll definitely hear some rumors about possible trades that Rizzo is working on.
The Yankees, from what I read, were asking on Cole, and got the sense from what I read earlier today that the Pirates just didn't know what they wanted to do. And I would think if we're going to, I mean, since this week is about reading tea leaves and seeing what color the smoke is at the Vatican and whether Nostradamus has come back from the dead and all that, I think if you start to see Andrew McCutcheon's name start to fly around, I think all bets are off with the Pirates, and Cole might get moved. And boy, I would love, I think he answers a lot of, plugs a lot of holes with Washington if that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. He's a great starting pitcher, and he's under team control for a few years, so I would definitely love to have him with the Nets.
All right, so that's going to do it for us tonight. These are going to be quicker shows than normal because we're just kind of talking about nothing at that point. Good that Drew Douglas is back with us. We hope that Drew was able to be with us or all 4 nights. Seth asked, does he get traded? I think I would, if I was to put a number on it, Seth, I'd say 70-30 yes. I think there's a 70% chance that he moves. I think they really want to protect those on the farm. And he's never going to have a higher value than what he has right now. Drew, do you want to put a percentage on it, or?
Yeah, I agree. I think the 70-30 sounds about right. And yeah, like you said, his value is never going to be higher than right now. He's had multiple opportunities, and he's always struggled. So for all we know, 2017 might have been the peak of his career.
Right. Right. You were taken to task by a reader for saying that, by the way. But you might be right. You might actually be right. So we'll be with you each night at 9 o'clock. Tomorrow on the site, you are working. What you are working on?
The possibility of Gio Gonzalez being traded.
And what am I working on?
The fan-sided Phantom 250.
Oh, that's right, because we're on the list, so I gotta wait for that to come out. So thanks again for making this the biggest day in site history. We're so greatly appreciative. And, please feel free to chat with us tomorrow. Seth, we think there's probably, if there's going to be a move, it'll be during one of these shows because that's the way it is. So those are our 2 scheduled pieces for tomorrow. If something happens, follow us on Twitter at District on Deck. I will be live tweeting anything that actually looks like it's a close deal, and we'll get something up on it as soon as possible. But for now, follow us on Facebook at District on Deck, like and subscribe here on YouTube, and of course on Twitter at District on Deck. And so until tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, we might actually have something a little more than other people's rumors to talk about. For Drew Douglas, I'm Ron Juckett. Have yourself a good night.